Welcome back to Sparks and Recreation. In today's video, we're going to explain the crazy order of events that led to the tragic loss of one of hockey's greatest players of all time. It's a story that involves a gifted supercar, high speeds, a little donut shop, and over $13 billion. This is the forgotten story of how a free Di Tommaso Pantera led to the world donut domination.
Big stand on.
This was the tragic story of Tim Horton, born January 12, 1930. Before we get too far, yes, the same Tim Horton that you get your coffee and donuts from. Tim Horton was a player in the NHL, the National Hockey League, for those who don't know. Won 4 Stanley Cups, an All-Star 3 times, and he has records that stood the test of time. This guy's nickname was Superman. He is renowned as one of the strongest hockey players to ever play. If you ask guys like Bobby or other people who played with him and against him, said that there was nobody stronger or more feared on the ice than this. But he was a gentle giant. He played 486 consecutive games, a statistic that was not broken for over 30 years in 2007. He played through multiple injuries like broken jaws, legs, fingers, hands, and just kept going. He would not miss a game. In a 1962 playoff run, he got 3 goals and 13 assists in 12 games, another record that was not broken until 1994. That's 30 years later, guys. The guy was an absolute beast. He was ahead of his time, and he was also an offensive nightmare. He was able to lead rushes from the defensive zone through neutral into the offensive zone and set up plays. Defensemen are not always known for being goal scorers, and this guy could put them up. Every year he had really good statistics, and he had a career that spanned over 24 seasons. In his early 40s, he finally left the Maple Leafs, the team that he had gotten 4 Stanley Cups with. He was traded to the New York Rangers, where he only played 15 games. At that point, he then switched over to the Penguins for 1 season, and then at age 42 was signed by the Buffalo Sabres. At this point, you're thinking, alright, cool, Tim Horton, great hockey player. But what does this have anything to do with donuts, supercars, tragedy? Where does it go? So how do we get the donuts? Well, in 1964, him and his partner, Jim, a business partner, May 17th, 1964, buy what was a burger joint and switch it over to donuts. It does not do that well. It takes almost 3 years before they get a bigger investor, a guy named Ron Joyce, to come through, and they actually start to franchise out and figure out the donut business. Remember, at this time, 64, 67, he's still at the prime of his career. He has not switched teams. He's still a Maple Leaf. He's out there winning cups. The donut business was actually just kind of like a side hustle. It's actually the trade at 42 years old that sets everything in motion. At the beginning of the 73 season, Tim's like, I want to retire. I want to just go off into the donut sunset, run my little donut shop, and be done. However, the manager of the Buffalo Sabres goes, how about we give you a $100,000 contract, which was huge at the time, plus I give you a supercar, a 1972 Di Tommaso Pantera. Our boy Timmy here, obviously a man of culture, goes, hell yeah, I will play 1 more season. Give me that supercar, baby. So let's go over what is the Pantera. Well, the Pantera is a result of an Italian man who knew how to design beautiful looking cars but could not figure out how to get a power plant put in it that was Italian. So basically these are kit cars, kind of. They're made in very small numbers and they actually are powered by Ford power plants. So you could either get like a 302, you get a 351, Windsor, Cleveland. They came out at the time, they only weighed about 3,000 pounds, and they had between 280, 350 horsepower, which is huge. These things rocketed from 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds, which compared to the hero cars, like everybody regards these muscle cars as these unobtainable numbers, this car would keep right up with it, or be faster. And it looked like a knockoff Ferrari, so why wouldn't you want one? They only made 7,260 of these altogether from 1971 to actually into the early 90s. They were still making them. The ones in the 80s are all like body kitted out with like huge wings and diffusers and all this just crazy stuff. You get 427s put in them. They were actual supercars in the 90s. Back in the day, it was still a little mild, but fast enough to get yourself in trouble, which is exactly what our boy Tim did. These cars are easily able to go to 150 plus miles an hour, even back in the early 70s. Again, we hit the crossroads in the story. Cool, Tim Horton, great hockey player, has a cool car. Now what? What's it have to do with donuts? So this is where our story takes a tragic twist. February 21st, 1974, Tim's up in Canada playing his old team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. He gets smacked real hard in the jaw, hurts his leg. Turns out he broke his jaw. The game finishes, he keeps playing, because I said he never stops. The dude just keeps going and going and going. He never stops. After he puts in a night's work of crushing guys, he decides, I need to get home to Buffalo, because we have games coming up. The hockey is like every other night for like 6 months straight. He's got to get home. He decides to stop, grab a drink with his buddy, Ron Joyce. Unfortunately, he starts drinking a little too much, and he's been taking some medicine to try to help him get over some of these pains and aches that he has from having broken jaw, broken legs, all this stuff that's got just piling up against him. His friend Ron picks up the phone. He calls Tim's brother and he goes, you need to come get your brother. He's smashed. He's drunk. He's been taking some drugs. He really should not drive home. It should be noted that his friend Ron, the one that's calling everybody, is the other primary shareholder of Tim Hortons. He packs up and he starts heading on the road around 2:30 in the morning. At 4 a.m., a woman reports a car at high speed on the Ontario Parkway. 15 minutes later, a warning goes over police scanner. 30 minutes later, an officer sees Tim go flying by at over 140 miles an hour in his Pantera. He notes that the car is heading Niagara bound, which means heading back towards Buffalo. He turned on his sirens and did pull out to chase him, but the car was so fast he didn't even have a chance. He pulled right back off. It is not known whether Tim thought that cop was still after him or he was just hauling it. Either way, coming up on a curve, he overshot it, ended up going through a median, hitting basically a culvert that was on the side, and the car flipped. He was ejected 120 feet out of the car and was pronounced dead at a local general hospital. There was no public autopsy, however, it was revealed later that he had 2 times the legal limit of alcohol, including 3 different types of basically stimulant drugs. I don't even know how to pronounce them. Whatever they were using back in the 70s, he was getting lit. So here we are. Unfortunately, a man in his prime of his career, well, actually the tail end of his career, but he was still making good money, making some of the best deals he's ever made in his life. His partner started growing this donut business, and it's exploding. They are now up to almost 10 locations. The hockey world is shocked. Tim's gone. What does his buddy do? In a matter of no time, he goes to Tim's wife and goes, I will buy you out for $1 million. At the time, $1 million is a ton of money. They just went through this tragedy. What's she gonna do? He's the breadwinner of the family. He's the hockey star. She takes the money. The timing of this situation is pretty crazy. At the time, they had just signed their first franchise contracts, and he was actually going to make more money from that donut shop that was failing for the first time this year. And then, unfortunately, he passes away. There's rumors that there was a little bit of bickering between the two, and that's actually what part of the meeting was, is Tim wanted to keep it more of home style, small town, only have a couple, but Ron, he's been in the business, he knew how to grow a business. He had bigger ambitions and bigger plans for Tim Hortons, and they needed the name. Tim Horton at the time was a Sidney Crosby or Ovechkin, household names, even people outside of hockey. You knew you could trust to go down to Tim Hortons and get yourself a quality donut. By the time the paperwork was through and the $1 million transfer was over, there was 40 franchise stores underneath Joyce. Over the next few years, they grew and grew. By 1991, he had 500 franchise stores under him. By spring of 1995, it had passed McDonald's as Canada's largest chain restaurant. In 2004, Joyce sold out his portion of Tim Hortons, he did keep a few shares, to the Wendy's Corporation for $600 million. He just sold the primary shares, I'm sure he still kept a bunch. Wendy's then sold their primary shares to the Burger King Corporation for $11.4 billion in 2014. Today, Tim Hortons has $13.9 billion in just public assets. There's over 5,000 stores as of 2016. They have 15 countries covered in Tim Hortons Timbits. They average $4 to $5 billion in yearly revenue, but they only make about $900 million in profit. By the end of the year 2009, Tim Hortons was 76% of an entire Canadian market's production of baked goods. This massive amount of money and power in the Tim Hortons company being transferred for only $1 million did not come without any drama. Basically, from the day she signed on until her death, Tim's wife tried to sue multiple times, saying that she was basically put into a position during her grief to sell the company at a very, very undervalued situation. She sold it for $1 million in a Cadillac Eldorado. She never won a single lawsuit saying that she should get any of those shares back or that it should be overturned that she's half ownership of the company, which, when you sign a contract, I mean, it is what it is. It is very unfortunate, though. If you look deep enough on the internet, you can find that there is some little gray area whether any of this was set in motion on purpose or if it's just a very unfortunate circumstance. It's really tragic. The guy played an awesome career, and I feel like that, honestly, a lot of people have forgotten that Tim Horton was actually even a hockey player. It's just this name that we all recognize as a coffee brand, a Canadian coffee, and unless you're like diehard hockey guy, so much time has passed. I think we've actually forgotten what an awesome player he was, and the story involves quite a few twists and turns. We were not expecting that a gift of an awesome sports car would lead to a company that ends up being worth literally $14 billion. That's more than some like very small country's total GDP. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you have a Pantera, save those things. Actually, they end up destroying Tim's because they didn't want people to collect it. The car was actually sent out to a scrapyard after it was fully documented and looked at for an investigation. The VIN number was 4557ZF, and unfortunately, of only 7,000, that one was destroyed by him. And also Vince Neil of Motley Crue, he killed a guy on accident crashing one of his. So the Di Tommaso Pantera is a car that will always live in infamy. If you made it this far, tell me what you think in the comments. Did you like this video? Do you think that there's a little more to it than just a couple of friends that owned a business together, met late at night, did some drugs and drinking, and then the guy ended up dying a couple hours later, and then the next time that you hear about this man, he's worth $600 million. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with us. Comment, like, subscribe, share this video if you found it interesting. See you later.